Okay. So we have already covered loops, conditions, how to define conditions, how to format strings, how to uh, kind of manipulate string values. So we have learned all that. Now in this module, let me share my screen so it would be. So can you see this?
Reading and writing text files, yes.
Yeah, so we'll be going through the unit 5, which is reading and writing text files and how we can kind of uh, like read and how we can manipulate, how we can kind of like read the chunk of the text files and how we can write the text files. So we'll study this in this module. So let's go into the details of that. So the goal of this module is to read from and write to files in Python and how we can use different opening modes and what are the methods for reading files. So today we'll be going through a lot of coding stuff. So it will be easier if the lecture is already recorded, so if you want to revisit things, it would be good for you to revisit on your own pace and practice it along as in the recording phases. So it will be kind of easier to understand that how we can do, because there is a lot of information that has been compact into um, I think 2 lecture video. So we will be mostly doing the coding stuff. I'll be running some pre-recorded lectures, which includes examples of Python code, but I'll be explaining many of the stuff through the code itself.
Okay.
Okay. So for reading and writing text, most of the concepts are very similar to Java. So if you already are familiar with Java, you would know that there is a buffer text reader or there is a scanner or there are some things. So basically what we do is we initiate a resource, and from those resources, we define that whether we have to write something or we have to read something. And once we write something or read something, we release the resources. So similar is the case with the Python, because it's also an object-oriented programming language. So basically what we do is we initiate an object that kind of reads or writes something, and then we release the resources accordingly. So basically, text files are very commonly used to store information, and these are the commonly used files that we might use in the data management or data processing, maybe CSV files, maybe XLS files, or there are some text files. So these files include that are created with simple text editors such as Notepad or Python source code or any HTML files. There are XML files as well. But in order to read XML files or in order to read JSON files, we have to look into other aspects. Text files are quite simple to read.
Okay.
So for opening files, there must be some constraints, and the constraints are that the file should exist. Not should, but must exist. So there should be a file that needs reading. And the file objective return must be saved in a variable. So we need to like save the object of the file into a particular variable, and then we can use that variable to access it, to read it, or to manipulate it, or to add something, or to append something.
Yeah.
So in order to open for writing, there are specifically modes for it. So in this case, if we want to open a file for writing, we provide the name of the file as the first argument with the open command. So open command is the default syntax for reading a file. So if there is a file named output.txt, so we are kind of like using that particular file for reading. And then we define W. Now W is the mode for writing. So you want to write a file. If there is R, then you want to read a file. So there are different modes here, and this particular second argument refers to the mode of the file that you are using for the file, like for reading or for writing or for appending or for any other purpose. So if the output file already exists, it is emptied before the new data is written into it. So if you want to use the write mode, if there is any text already in that particular file with the same name, it would just empty all the contents so that you can write the new contents on it. But if the file does not exist, it will kind of create it. It will create an empty file and then we can write on it.
Okay.
And similar for the reading. So if you want to read the file, the argument would be R, and the file name would be the same. So it's like you are reading a file and you are reading it. You are reading it in a reading mode. So you want to check the contents, that what are the contents of the file. Okay. So I guess that it would be easier for you to solve this now, based on the based on the syntax. But again, as I mentioned, that in Java, what we do is if we use buffered IO reader, or if we use scanner, or if we use any other method, we first initiate the object and then at the end we release the resources. So in Java, in Python, it is the same thing. So if we have initiated something like open, we have to release the resources by closing it.
Yeah.
So when we are done processing a file, we need to close the file so that the changes that we have made are written properly. But it's like if the program exits without closing a file that has been opened for writing, there can be some missing things. Like it may not write the output properly, or some things may be gone missing while writing the output. So this can happen. So in order to close it properly, we need to close the resources. Like in this case, in file and out file that we have already initiated, we have to close it. Now, if we want to read a line from a file, what we can do is we can use read line syntax. So read line syntax is kind of a method that reads the text, starting the current position and continuing till the end of the line is encountered. And when a file is opened, an input marker is positioned at the beginning of the file. So input marker is then moved to the next line as it reads, and then it reads till the end when the file has no string to return. So there are two methods basically, which is read line and read lines. So read line reads line one by one, while the read lines can read multiple lines at the same time. And the syntax is, so once we have already opened the file, let's say we want to read the contents of a particular file, we will name the file in the open arguments, and then we will open it in the read mode. And once we have saved it in a variable, we can use that particular variable to read line. So from reading the file, for example, we want to read from input.txt that contains the following, like shown below. So we can use read line for reading every string on mentioned in the different lines. So basically, let's say the first line is flying, the next line has the string circus, and the third line has nothing. So if we use read line for the first, it will return flying. For the second, it will return circus. And for the third, it will just end. It will terminate because there is no line remaining. So in this case, calling read line yields empty string because we have reached to the end of the file. And if the file contains a blank line, then read line just returns a string containing \n, which refers to a new line. And this is the syntax for read line. If we want to read multiple lines, of course, we can use loops. So we can use while loop or we can use for loop, so that repeatedly reads a line of text and processes until the sentinel value is reached. And if there is an empty string which is returned by the read line, it will just terminate the loop. So in this case, we are reading the line while it reaches the sentinel value. So while it
Okay.
is not equal to sentinel value, it will keep on processing the lines.
Right.
And there is also, so let me just um, give you examples so it will be easier to understand. Okay. Because there are differences between R split and split, and there are other methods, so it will be easier for us to just practice it and then understand that what's happening. Okay, so let's say I have my file and I want to open um, a file, but first let me create a file first. Okay. So let's say I want to create a file like this, testing first line, and then let me save it as downloads in the same directory.
Okay.
So let's hope we can access it. So let's say we open the file with the same name and we open it in read mode. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we can read the line as it's already saved in the object my file. So we can use my file object dot read line and we can print, and then we can release the resources. Okay.
Okay.
So it reads the first line. So basically this is just to demo that how read line works. Now let's say
Yeah.
if I want to read the line and use some of the arguments in read line. So what we have to do is, because we have already closed the resources, we have to again open it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then my line equals to my file dot read line. And now what we will do is we will use 10. So what it will do is it will only show 10 strings, the first 10 strings. This will this will display the first 10 strings in the first line that we will read. And now we are closing the resource. Let's see. Okay. So these are the first 10 strings that has been returned. Now we can use the loop. Let's say we again open the resource and we use my line equals to file dot read line, and we can use the loop while my line, which is will create a boolean variable. So it's while it is true, it will keep on running the loop. And when there are no strings to return, it will just like terminate this loop. And now we are closing the resource. I hope it works. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it kind of like prints out each and every line. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's say we want to read the line, we want to read multiple lines at the same time. So what we can do is we can again open the resource. So instead of read line, we will use read lines. And we'll use print. Okay, so it reads the line and it adds backslash n, which represents a new line. And it reads the line in the form of list. So now this is a kind of a list that is being created from the document that we are reading.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and again, it's like we used it with the while loop. We can use it for with the for loop as well. So if we want to use for loop instead of while loop, we can use.
Yeah.
So it will also read all the lines.
Yeah.
Now we were discussing about the R split in this case. So
Yeah.
R split is like it can kind of split the text into different string values. Like because read line reads the line, it will read each and every string. So it can split the line into different characters into different string values. Okay.
Okay.
So in this case, the syntax is line dot r split. Okay. And how does it work? So there are times when you want to read input by each word or each line or a single character. So Python provides many predefined functions. Let's say read, split, and strip for these tasks. So processing task input is required for almost all types of program that interact with the user. Now, if we want to read words, we can read individual words from a text file. For example, suppose our input file contains a line text as shown. This is a line of text. So what we can do is we can use rstrip or we can use split. Now, both of these functions can be used. So if we want to print one word per line, we can use it. Or if there is no method for reading a word from file, we must read a line first and then split it into the individual words. So let's see one of the example for this. It will be easier to understand. So let's say we have some text. Let's say we define fruits. And what we want to do is we want to R split and we want to use the splitting criteria as comma.
Okay.
So this splitting criteria will um, and the one is like we are setting the maximum split parameter to 1. So it will kind of return a list with 2 elements. Okay, so let's not just use it. Let's just use this one, and we want to use print x. So it will just separate out each and every word and save it as a string. We will be getting a list that have kind of like three values in it. But as I suggested that we can use this um, to set the maximum split parameter to 1. So if we run it, you will see that apple and banana is the is result has been resulted in one value, and cherry has been resulted in second value. So there are maximum two values because we have defined this as one.
Okay, yeah, see that.
Okay, so let me again um, give you the same example. So let me open the file again. And this is the criteria, the space, the blank space. Once the blank space will be detected, it will split it will kind of split the characters or the words, sorry. So in this case, you can see that testing, and then there is a space and hyphen. So hyphen is separated out, and then there is a space, and then there is first line, and it has been like separated out, and then there is a separate line, and then there is another line which has these words, then there is another line which has these characters, so all of them are splitted. Okay,
Yeah,
and we can also use different values for it. Okay, so we have understood what r split is. Now let us understand what r strip is. So there is difference between R split and R spread. So let's say we have a text, let's say TU and we have multiple spaces like this. Okay. So what R spread does is it would just strip out all the blank spaces after the text.
okay,
And so we can use like this. So let's say if of all institutes. Let me also print txt to give a kind of a comparison. Txt, um, let me just the same thing to give you a comparison, but instead of x, we use txt. So in this case, you will see that there are blank spaces, but as we have used strip, um, we can just remove the blank spaces from here. So we can use rstrip. Rstrip does the same, but it reduces the blank spaces from the right side, like after the text.
okay,
Okay, and we can use it for different purposes as well. So let's say um, the text has some inconsistencies. So we have you. Let's say we define TOWN, and there are multiple commas and there are different random texts, and then we can use this r strip but then we have to define that what to omit. So in this case, we want to omit uh, comma, dot, or Q, S, and E that are randomly defined. And once we define it, we can just print this and we will only get DOW. So what it does is it strips all the what we say is randomness that has been occurred in the text.
Okay.
Now again, we can also use different techniques. So our strip is to strip those random text or strip blank spaces. Now we can use split method as well. Now what does a split method is? It splits each of the word. Okay. So let's say if I want to define a text which is welcome to Dublin, and we use split method and then we use print. So it will kind of separate out the words. And we
Okay.
can also use like different separator mechanisms. We can try to put that in the argument of the split. So it will kind of understand that how we have to split the method. So let's say um, I define this. Hello,
Mm.
my name is Parker. I am 19 years old. I live in Queens. And let's say we use split, but this time we use the separator comma. So we do not want to just split each word. We want to split the phrases or the text in between the commas.
Yeah.
And then we want to print X. So what it does is it will just use comma as a separator and it will print all those things. Similarly, we can use different symbols for it. So let's say if we have uh, A and we want to use split it and we want to split it through hash.
Okay.
We can use this and you can see that it has been split.
Yeah. Split. Yeah.
Okay, and if we want to, let's say we want to split it in maximum two phrases. So we can use this argument as a, so what it does is it sets the maximum split parameter to 1. So we will get a list with only two elements. So in this case, you will see this output.
Mhm.
I hope it's clear now. So we have already practiced R strip. We have already seen how a split works. So what split method returns is the list of substrings that result from splitting the string at each blank space. But you can use different criterias, you can use different separators, you can use commas, you can use any symbol to separate these string values. So I hope that you will be able to um, answer this.
Mhm.
Okay, so there are some trinkets, so you can use this. I'll just open it so you can kind of use it for practicing your coding skills for employers and also, okay. And okay, so let's here.
Okay.
So basically, this is okay. So how we can read records? We can read records, we can read formats, and how to read records. So basically, if a text file is kind of a collection of data records, so we can just read um, through multiple fields. For example, we can read student data that may comprise of identification number, its name, address, or class year. Or we can just work with text files that contain data records. You generally have to read the entire record before you can actually process it.
Okay.
Now, again, we have seen that how we can read multiple lines. So if we have an organization or a format of the records, it can vary for multiple files. So sometimes it's separated by comma, sometimes the single records are separated by lines. For instance, on the first line, it's the name, and for the second line, it's the identification number, like a student ID, and for the third line, it's the date of birth or something else. So it represents a single record. But what do we have to do is we have to process it separately. So we have to customize the reading mechanism, that how we read the file. But a typical format for such data is to store each field on a separate line of the file with all fields of a single record on consecutive lines like this. So we have one name, and we have its record, associated record, and then name and the associated record, and then something like this. So record contains multiple fields, and each of the field is represented in its own line. So what we can do is we can use rstrip while reading the line, and then we can define the ID code for each of the countries separately.
Yeah.
So, or we can use a delimiter. So we can use delimiter as well, as we have already seen in our examples. And you can use the indexing as well in the loop. Now, I guess that it will be clear more. So there is a guided tutorial. Please let me know if you can hear the voice in the guided tutorial.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say, to Sonny, you might have
Yeah.
seen when I submitted my last submission. I mean, I know you basically show in the lecture this sort of Python code. I wasn't quite able to get that working that I wanted, so I had to actually take that and submit it, make a submission in the population data file in fact last week's assignment or the week before, and work it up myself in Python. But I mean, I'm not yet familiar with how to actually make the Python actually work it in the system. Would I be penalized if I do that?
No, no, it's like for the last time when I used Python, it was just for giving you the examples to
Okay,
explain you some things that were not in the lectures.
right,
But
that's great.
for the maybe it's like for the assessment, it will only be based on the Jupyter notebooks and
Yes.
the assignments that we are giving.
Okay, super.
Okay, so please let me know if you can hear the voice.
Okay, I will.
Okay, so please go through this and it will explain you some of the.
I'm not hearing any voice at the moment now.
So basically, it explains the opening modes, that how the opening modes are working,
Right.
and you can use it for reading text files, for reading binary files, and you can use like EOL markers or special characters as EOL markers to kind of identify the new lines.
Okay. All right.
In this case, as I already mentioned, there are modes. So we can use X mode, which create a files and returns an error if the file exists. W, which writes the file that will create a file if it doesn't exist. And A is to append, that will create a file if it doesn't exist.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. What does that WARGS mean? Something to do with arguments, is it?
This one?
It says at the very end of that, I've seen it before, KWARGS. I presume
Is
the ARGS is arguments. I don't know what the KW is. Is KW right?
Yeah, so basically these are basically predefined functions. So they need arguments. So
Right.
in this case, we have arguments one and arguments two. So if there is any error, it will highlight that these are the arguments that we have problem, and we'll discuss that when we'll use exceptions. We'll learn
Okay.
about exceptions in this class, that how to deal with those exceptions and how to code for not having these kind of errors.
Okay. Hmm. Mhm. Mm, wasn't fun. Okay, well, I see it's obviously very important to use the coding and so you can what your point you made earlier, to be able to make design your code in such a way that it's reusable when you're moving from one program to the next one. I assume that's obviously in a major team here.
Yeah. So the idea is to explain you that how there are certain issues that occur. In this case, there can be a latency to update it. It depends on the storage device that we have. So sometimes it's not updated right away. So maybe we have to wait. And this needs to be taken into account while coding. Of course, we are learning to code for a bigger purpose. It's not just for learning, it's for creating something, or it's for designing a system, or it's for designing an analytical system. So it should be considered while designing the code. So we
Okay,
have to consider each and every aspect.
very good.
So I hope that this would help while
Yeah,
coding. And then there are multiple link files. So you need to go through this as well.
okay. Mm. Yeah, okay.
Here you can notice is that um, we can use the read line and the strip together.
Okay.
So previously, what we were doing is we were kind of first saving the read line into an object, and then we were using that particular object to strip.
Yeah.
So that can be used together. So it's like read line and then a strip. So these work this these these commands can work together. So in this case, it has been working together for inside the loop as well as outside of the loop.
Yeah. And once again, that loop, as soon as the lines we reach the end of the file, that while loop will stop.
Yeah. So it's like while true, it will keep on reading the lines.
Okay. Is there any limit on the size of a file that the computer program can open? Is it limited by the size of the file to put into the CPU? What's the limits in terms of the size of file it can read?
Resources. Of course, if there are millions of lines that needs to be read,
Mm,
it depends on the computational complexity and the computing resources that you have. But again, it's like let's say if you have LLMs or if you have like the data set for like web crawl or something that has maybe millions and billions of lines.
mm,
So in that case, if you will try to read it all at once, it would take ages to do so. But if you will read line by line and then you will strip it, of course, it takes a lot of time because it has to read all of the lines unless and until the document is finished. So it would take a lot of time. But again, it depends on that how you pre-process it, how you kind of maybe
yes.
use those. So maybe you can pre-process it first. You can just take out some of the like thousands of lines and then you save it into different files and then you process it in a parallel way. So this all can be done. These are all like programming tricks or
Sure.
engineering tricks that can be used. But of course, if there are large files, it takes time. It takes time, and it depends on the computational resources that you have.
So ChatGPT actually generate that text.
Yeah, so it's just to explain that how to read. So that's why the text was generated using ChatGPT.
Very good. Can Python interact with ChatGPT?
Can you repeat the question?
Can Python interact with ChatGPT? Or do you go into ChatGPT and get
Uh,
interaction and basically import the file?
it depends that what kind of version ChatGPT we are using because for ChatGPT 4 it's kind of closed and we need to have developers access to get the API, and then from the API we can interact with the ChatGPT 4. So in that case, if we have access and all that, then of course we can integrate ChatGPT. But with the open sources like Llama, maybe we can have access to the pre-trained models and then we can use them directly into the Python. But again, it depends on the newer versions. It depends on how they provide the access to their pre-trained models, how they provide access to the APIs. Based on that, we can have integration with Python.
Very good.
So these are some of the trinkets. So you can use them to practice your coding skills. And there
Okay.
are some of the files that are also available. So you can use these uh, like empty spaces to write down your code and see how it works. So this is just for your practices. Of
By the
course,
way,
we will.
notice it says hidden from students. So will you obviously, when you upload the after to this lecture, will that to be turned off so the students will be able to see it?
Yeah, so basically once this lecture is over, I'll just like put on all like I'll make them all visible.
Super, that's great. And I can put them in. I can put them in my own Python file when I'm making the submission.
Mm. So basically, this tutorial will help you in understanding that how we can rename the files, how we can copy the files, and how we can delete the files.
Yes, I've been noticing that as I've been going forward, in terms of actually having to find files and read them into objects to get them into. Certainly, I think in the last exercise when you gave us on the population one, I read the file into a file object for a population and basically worked on it from there. But I mean that was as I said, that was a big learning exercise.
Yeah, sure. So basically, this tutorial will help you in understanding that how we can do all of those operations.
Mm. 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 Do we cover as well making directories and changing directories so I can do that anyway?
So basically, what it does is it explains you that how you can
Rename.
copy the file, or you can rename the file, or you can just copy the contents of the file, or you can delete the file. So this is all in this module.
Very good.
So basically, it's using a package. So in Python, you can import this package as OS. So once you
Operating
import the OS, OS have different operations that you can use, like renaming the file or removing the file, or maybe if you want to check whether the file exists in this particular path or not, and you can check that with the OS package.
system. Yeah. So I suppose, Sonny, the important point here is this: before you start messing with the file, to make it go and make a copy of it, and go do all the testing and experimenting on the copy of the file, so you don't corrupt the original file.
Yeah. So basically, the thing is that there are times when, basically we have seen that if we will just kind of assign to another variable and we'll make changes, it will also be, the changes will also be made in the subsequent variable that has been assigned. So instead, we want to do is we want to copy the file. So in this
Mm,
case, what the suggestion has been made is that you cannot directly copy. So what you have to do is you have to define your own user defined function. And in
mm,
that function, what you are doing is you are first opening it, the file that you want to read, and then the next file that you want to write. And then you are reading the lines from the files that you want to read, and then you are writing those lines to the file that you want to write. And in this way, you are copying the files line by line. But of course, there are other ways, like deep copy is one of the things that you can use to kind of like copy a particular contents of the variable. You will see, because there are some packages that kind of allow us to do that. For instance, pandas. So when we'll use pandas, you will see that there are many functions that are available to deal with data frames and to deal with Excel files or CSV files and all that. So we'll discuss about them. But for now and for practice, it's like we are still not using advanced packages. We are
mm.
only using basic ones that are readily available with Python before, like without installing any external libraries.
Yeah.
If we can just have more examples. So let's say, um, okay, let me just create one file very quickly.
Yeah.
Let's say I create this file.
Mm.
Also, we have not discussed about the binary ones. So if like we want to read or write binary files, we can use RB and WB. So WB is for writing binary files and RB is for reading the binary files. We have already seen what with statement can do.
Yeah.
So with a statement, we do not need to close the resources. So it's implicit that the resources will be closed. And we have already discussed about Python's OS module. So
Yes.
it's another valuable resource. We can rename the files and we can delete them, or we can check if they exist. We can use os.path submodule. So in this case, you can, if you can use os.join, so what you can do is you can join paths. So let's say if you have multiple folders, if you have subfolders, so what you can do is you can use os.join and then you can put folder and then subfolders to make a particular path. And it is quite beneficial when you are using multiple subfolders to access a file. So it will be very helpful in doing so.
Yeah.
Let's say we save it as the file, my file. And let me save it in the down. Okay, so it's already saved in the download, so we can access it. So let's say we use um, and we use it in R mode. Now we have not closed it. So if we perform any operation, it will kind of like perform subsequently. So now we are printing it line by line as we did before.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if we want to just print out all of the things at once, we can just use open file.txt. We use our operation and we can just print file.read. So we can use read command and it will just read all of the contents at once, not line by line.
Okay.
Okay, and we can use with. So we have already seen that how we can use with. So with open the file name as file,
Mhm.
we
Okay.
can just read the data all at once, and it will automatically um, close the resources that we have used.
Great. Yeah.
Okay, and if we want to just use some arguments like we want to open the file in the read mode and then we want to print, so it will just print these.
What's 200? 200 words or 200 lines? 200
Uh,
characters.
yeah, 200 characters. And let's say we want to use it with command. We are reading lines, and for each line in the data, we want to split the words, and we want to print each and every word. So we can do this by using this. So it divides it in the lines, and then with each line, it divides every line into words. So now
Right.
we have all the words that we want, and with each new line, if it's blank, then it will just create the blank space.
So I assume this is what they're using in large language models, this kind of operation.
No, it's like a pre-processing to that. So basically what you are doing is you are extracting the words from it.
Okay.
Okay. And if we want to use write operations, let's say I want to create my file dot. I want to write something. Backslash. If we will see, we have we will have this file. Yeah, my file.txt. And if we'll open this, we have this content that we have mentioned.
Okay.
And we can use with open my file.txt, and we can use the write mode again, but this time with width. And if we want to append something, we can use append. So if we check the contents now again, you will see that from the previous one, it has been replaced, and uh, we also added the new line which has appended the previous one. So in here, when we created this, and then when we again opened it in the write mode, this was just cleared up, and then a new sentence was added, which was this. And
Yeah.
once we run this, it will be saved. And if we open it in the append mode, we can append as much text as we want.
Good.
So this was just the basics of the file handling, that how we can do files and how we can write, how we can read. Now let us see that how we can handle the errors.
Okay.
Okay. So this time what we will do is we will handle input errors. We'll see how we can use them and how we can use try and except clauses. So if you are familiar with Java, in Java we actually use this try catch, but in Python we use try except for defining the exceptions. So
Okay.
the goal is to read a file of data. So let's say we have first line is the count of values and the remaining lines have values. Okay. So the risk is that the file may not exist that we are trying to read, and the file might have data in the wrong format. So what we can do is if we read the file, or if we read a wrong file, or if we read a wrong format, then it would create problems going forward if you are dealing with a lot of code and a lot of data. So it's better to create an outer loop that will handle exceptions and allow the program to continue. So what it will do is it will raise exceptions in the functions.
Okay.
So let's say if we want to use it, we define that, okay, prompt user for file name. Once it provides the file name, it may raise exception that the file not found. Okay. And it's like maybe the contents of the files are invalid that can't be used in our operations. So it can also provide an exception for the value error that the file contents are invalid. Okay. So we will see how we can define these. Again, it's like for creating a file object and calling read data function, no exception handling or no except clauses are provided. So what we can do is we can just um, define our own exception, or we can use finally. So in Java, it's also it's like the same keyword is used, which is final. So if you will use final, it means that the statement that is provided in the final will always be executed irrespective of if there is an error or not.
Okay.
So in Python, in finally, the command or the statement will be executed irrespective of if it meets the criteria or not. So in finally, it will execute the statement. Okay, every time. So in this case, it will return read data file, of course, if the condition is met, but it will always close the resources because it's mentioned in finally. So I hope that you will be able to answer this. But if we want to kind of handle input errors with the read data, we have to define exception handling. And we can raise value errors as exceptions. We can use runtime error exception that can cause function to exit. We will see how we can. Let me just explain you with how we can use handle errors with examples. So let's say we want to okay, just right. So we want to try to open and write to a file that is not writable. So normally it would provide us with an error, right? That we saw in the video previously. But if we want to try, like we have to define the exception. We want to define exceptions so that
Yep.
it would not result in an error, but it would provide us with instructions that what happened actually. So we
Okay.
would use try, and let's say we want to try to open a file, and again we want to try to write something,
Okay.
but we want to also provide exception that it should print something went wrong when writing to the file. So if the execution fails from the try, it will divert it to the exceptions that we have defined. And we can also define finally. So nevertheless, or like irrespective of whether the statement is executing or not, the statement in finally will be executed each and every time. So it will just close the resources. So that's why we define this resources in the finally. So it will always kind of close the resources because it's defined in finding. And we also provide an exception that print something went wrong when opening the file.
Yeah.
So in this case, if we cannot open the file as the first one, so we are defining the exception for this statement here. So something went wrong when opening the file is for this statement, and something went wrong when writing to the file is for this statement. And if we run it, it says something went wrong when opening the file. So it means that there is no file demo with the name demo file.
Okay.
Okay. Let's say we define my file 2 and something went wrong when writing to the file because we have not opened the file in the writing mode. So,
Right.
okay, so these are the we can define it like this. And we can define it with different functions. Let's say if we want to define divide function, okay, and we want to try that the floor division, sorry, gives only fractional values and part as answer. So we want to do this as like this,
Yeah.
and we want to print yes, your answer is result.
Yeah.
But we will also define the exception that if it fails to run and the exception is zero division error
Okay.
because it cannot be divided by zero. So
No.
we can print that sorry, you are dividing by zero. So what we want to do is look at parameters. Let's say we define 3 comma 2. Okay. So it says, yes, your answer is 1 because we are not dividing it by 0. But let's say we divide it by 0 here. So it will be, sorry, you are dividing by 0. So there is no error, but you are catching that this is the problem in this case. Okay, and you can use it with other examples like this one. We can define another example. Here's an example that demonstrates how to use multiple. So let's define try. We want to have integer input from a user. Um, equals to 10 divided by x. And we want to define exception. First exception is again the same, zero division error. So if you want to do, if you provide input as 0, it will print out you cannot divide by 0. And let's say we want to provide another exception, which is value error. So it's invalid input. Please enter a valid number. And we want to define another exception. So it ends up prints out an error occurred. Okay, so let's run this example. So if we run this example, it asks for a number. So let's say I provide 3, it runs. Okay. But if I provide, let's say 0, it says you cannot divide by 0. So the exception 0 division error was executed. If I run it again and let's say 0.2, it says invalid input. So it's not an integer value. It should be an integer value. Again, it's like, let's say I provide a string, it's an integer, it is not an integer value, so it provides value error. So we can define multiple of these kind of exceptions in the same
Yes.
statement. Okay. Let's consider the if and else as well. So we can use else command as well, else block. Okay, let me just write here else block. Let's define the same. We can use try. The result is x. And we can define exception 0 division error. We can say, sorry, it should be like this. And then we can use else. Um,
Mhm.
because indentation should be proper, otherwise it will result in an error. Your answer is, and now if we use divide 3 comma 2, okay, this works because it generates else state it executes else statement. But if we do like this, so it executes um, the exception.
Yeah.
And of course, we can use finally as well. So if we just modify this, let's say everything is the same, but we add a finally statement here. So finally, this block of code will always be executed, no matter what.
Programs.
Let's say we print. So let's say so of course it catches the exception that you are dividing by 0, but the code in the finally will always run. So this will always be executed.
Yeah.
So let me just give you an ex maybe let us just try something with the files that we are creating. So let's say we want to import OS.
Yeah.
And we want to define how to create file with the file name. And we want to try, and these are the statements where everything goes well as we want. We want to write the file as world, and it should print file, file name created successfully.
Okay.
And if there is any error, we define except IO error. And we say that error could not create a file called, and then we define the read file, and we use the same thing in file name, and read the contents, and we want to print out the contents, and we want to define the exception as well. Error, which is print. Let's see if we can use this. So let's say we want to create file with the name myfile2.txt,
Okay.
and it says myfile2.txt was created successfully. So there was no IO error. And if I want to read the file, let's say I want to read the file myfile3.txt. So this will provide me that error could not read file myfile3.txt, file does not exist. And if I just use this, and it reads and prints out.
Yeah.
Okay, and if we want to just let's say count the words, let's say we define, okay, we define in this case, if we want to count words from, let's say, my file2.txt, so there are only two words. If I use my file.txt, there are 254 words.
Yeah.
Okay, so it depends. If we want to have kind of a like whole blown, okay, so it will take time, but let's take this time because it will help you understand that how things work. So let's say we want to create file. We have already defined this, but we define it with try with Open file name W. Should have a new line, and it will just print L. Fully
Mm.
define file error. Another function which we have already did, but just to uh, we also define and we also define append operation. We define renaming of file. We just have to use OS.
Mm. Yeah.
This is all done. We can use, let's say we define example.txt and we define new file name equals to new underscore example.txt. What we want to do is first we will create file with the file name, and then we want to read the file with the same file name. We want to append something like this is some additional text,
Okay.
and then again we want to read the file. We want to rename it and read the file, but now with the new file name. But first, let us read the file with the same file name. Let's see if we can read it. Then with the new file name, and then we want to delete. Okay, let's use this. So of course, file example.txt created, and it has hello world, and then we want to text append the text. So it's hello world, and this is some additional text. And then the example.txt was renamed to new example.txt. And if we wanted to read the previous the file with the previous name, then it would generate an exception. And then again we want to read the file with the new name, it reads, and this is some additional text. And then finally the file has been deleted successfully.
Wow.
So you can see that it's like we have defined each and every function that is available for file operations, and we have defined exceptions for each of them, so that it would not generate any error, but just let us know that where the error persists, so we can make it we can work on the exception that has been created.
Yeah.
So this is all for now for this week. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Or
Okay, that's an awful lot of information, but a very interesting lecture today in terms of actually creating files and going into the Python and using that for the disk operating system for showing how to name files and switch around various parts. So I very much look forward to going to the exercises and the lecture when you put it up tomorrow, hopefully, and coming back to you. But I mean, thank you very much for the lecture. It was a very interesting in terms of how you dealt with all the exceptions.
okay, thank you. So I'll upload the lecture very soon, and hopefully you can access it. Meanwhile, please refer to the exercises. I'll enable them. And if you have any questions and you can ask, you can put on the messages or you can just email me.
Okay.
And next week, I guess that it's bank holiday. So I guess on 1st April, there will be no class and we'll continue from 8th of April, I guess.
Okay. Well, I very much look forward to do it, and you've given me lots of work to do in the meantime. And as I said, I'm learning an awful lot.
Yeah. Okay. See you then next week. Bye.
Okay. Thank you for that, Sunder. That's great.